Hi, this is Chuck Oliver. Welcome to this week's Hidden Wealth Solution Review. Well, tax independence through legal tax avoidance. Folks, let's get right into this. So I went back and did a little study of when we gained our independence here in our country in 1776, and it was Independence Day. And it talks about how we free ourselves from taxes, which typically we have to work through basically May before most of us actually get to keep a dollar. But it was taxes then versus taxes now. And I found this interesting. Back in the day, which is, I think, really kind of interesting, right? There were no taxes. There were no income taxes. There were corporate taxes. There were payroll taxes. There were taxes on goods like tariffs, but there were no taxes. And then we got this tax that came about in 1913, which was really designed to basically pay for the Federal Reserve, which clearly doesn't know how to do their job. And as I read through this study of going back and looking at taxes, it talked about how all this kind of came about. We remember the Boston Tea Party, et cetera. And it was really interesting. They found fault. They said the history of the present king of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries, all having an indirect object that objected, the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. This is where they started taxing on a state level. He, the king, they're saying, has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, right? Making it up as you go. Boy, we know somebody does that. For imposing taxes on us without our consent. See, while saying that the U.S. tax system changed considerably since our first Independence Day is an understatement. We should continue to honor the power of taxes, obviously by learning how to legally avoid them, on our livelihoods as we look towards the future reform of our tax code, folks, and reform it is. So here you've got this president cheering this week about what a great state of the economy's in, and you even had this dingbat, and I mean absolute dingbat. I'm sorry, I just speak from the heart, right? The White House press secretary, this Jean-Pierre, defending President Biden's economic policies, right? She says Americans feel better about their finances. Okay, the highest inflation in 41 years, taxes being proposed, there's going to be $7 trillion of deficit spending projected already without any more fiscal budget, runaway drunken sailor spending over the next 10 years. And it's going to add overall $19 trillion to our national to our not just deficit spending annually, but our overall debt for this country, $19 trillion, folks. And where's that going to come from? It's going to come from higher taxes. Well, let me give you a couple of them because people are going to be blown away by this. Supreme Court this week is to decide whether Congress can tax wealth. So there's a couple, actually their last name are the Moores, and this statement was quoted, the Constitution does not allow Congress to point to any pot of money and call it income and then income tax it, according to Andrew Grossman, who's the lead counsel for the Moores case. He says income means the same thing now that it did when the 16th Amendment was ratified. Gains that have been realized by the taxpayer, meaning they were trying to tax this income before the client even recognized the gain. And this has happened under the Senate Finance Banking Committee chair proposed by Senator Wyden out of the great state of Oregon under the Biden administration, which you know what side of being bent on taxes he is. He wants a growth tax. He wants a stock buyback tax. He wants a transaction tax. So basically anybody that's trying to get ahead and not count on the government handouts, the makers, as I like to say, right? The takers are just waiting in line, folks, to take. Well, think about it. Biden's now proposing in this new this new fiscal budget coming out here in a few months, almost $5 trillion of additional taxes. Additional taxes are going to have to be paid from somewhere. Well, get this. To tax what hasn't even been recognized as a gain is a growth tax. So now what they're trying to propose in this ruling, and we're having to have the Supreme Court rule on it, is one tax. There's another tax in the Southeast in states like North Carolina and South Carolina that have now abolished it, but now states like Tennessee still have it, where you're actually taxed on your profession based on what your profession is in the state. Like, you can't make this stuff up. This is according to the Los Angeles Times and Forbes. And it goes on to say, right, no one should be taxed just to go to work, no matter their profession. So now a no state income tax state like Tennessee is following suit with the with state income tax states like North Carolina to ratify this particular ridiculous tax. Well, now there's this other tax, folks. I hate to keep giving you the bad news on taxes. I'm going to give you good news here in a second. The you make a lot of money tax hits more Americans, according to the Wall Street Journal, known as the net investment income tax. This is what they also call the Obamacare tax, which many people don't realize is this extra 3.8% tax, basically to buy a bunch of votes for the takers, that now if you have a certain income or you sell investment assets, then they're going to pile this extra 3.8% on top of that, especially if like you're a corporation and you're getting dividend income, right, at a 15% dividend tax rate. Now they're going to add another 3.8% to that, folks, pushing you closer to 20. It's not going to end there, folks. Let me talk to you about Steve and Denise. Steve's in his 60s, but Denise is she's right close to that required minimum distribution age. And they, just like Kurt and Regina and a few others that we met with just this last week, had simple goals. We have somebody doing our taxes, but they're not saving us taxes. We need to know what else is out there. And how do we hedge against inflation? Because obviously cutting our taxes, right, our taxation is obviously going to help us offset some inflation. I'd like to learn more about converting taxes that can use deductions to offset that. So I'll teach you this Wednesday at retirementprotected.com. Special webinar Wednesday on tax independence, right, through legal tax avoidance, and how to remove your retirement and your income and your inheritance to your kids and your children, your spouses, etc., without any tax. Now, it's a deduction that you can take. It's been around since the inception of the tax code, going back here, federal tax codes in the United States, going back to 1913. And it allows up to 100% deduction, typically 75% in the first year. But we're teaching clients through our tax team, through our retirement planning combination of having a tax team, folks. If we don't get the taxes right, getting you more return with less risk and less cost just causes you to pay higher taxes. So we got to start with the taxes. So if someone's not doing tax planning and they're just doing tax preparation, that is a big difference. Those that tell you what you owe versus those who teach you how much less you have to pay. And it all starts with the taxes, folks, because they're coming. They're coming from a lot of different angles. I think of the goals, right? We'd like to retire comfortably, but we want to get out of avoid the market collapses and these tax collapses, because we're going to absolutely get buried by taxes when we have to start taking monies out of these accounts. Folks, you work hard for your money. Imagine more financial success, less stress, less worry, more time with family, less agonizing over this inflation, the worry of future taxation, learning how to nip it in the bud, legal tax avoidance through gaining tax independence, right? Become tax independent and do it through legal tax avoidance. Retirementprotected.com, special webinar, educational Wednesday. Don't buy the lie out of this media and this administration. Even the press secretary is touting how well claims Americans feel better about the Biden economy. And Biden's trying to take credit for one of the crappiest economies, the highest inflation in 41 years, and drunken sailor spending that's going to spend us in taxes into the oblivion. And you can have tax independence through legal tax avoidance. Let me teach you how. Retirementprotected.com, retirementprotected.com.